Life is all about stories. The person you are today is the product of a collection of experiences that you've had from the day you were born until today. Some of them you remember really vividly. Some of them you can actually attribute to your behaviors today. Are you comfortable in public places? Are you good with people you meet for the first time? Do you have just a really core group of close friends? Are you nervous in front of people when you're speaking? Any number of things all anchor back to something that happened or an experience you had when you were younger. You could probably think of the time that you accidentally touched a hot stove as a child, and you're never going to touch a hot stove again. In my family, my sister and I used to stick paper clips in electrical sockets because we were not very smart, but we learned. It happens. I remember probably the most vividly the first time I fell in love. I was in the 6th grade. I was probably 11 years old, is that right? 11 years old in the 6th grade? And this girl, her name was Sarah, transferred into my class, into my school, halfway through the year. Her parents lived in another city and moved in. And this was, 4 weeks prior to this one day that I'll remember more than anything. So I remember seeing her in class for the first time, and she had hair down to her shoulders, dirty blonde hair, and a mouthful of braces, and she had this smile that my heart just melted the moment that I saw it. And it was one of those moments that was very confusing. I'd never felt that way before. I never knew that I could just immediately and unconditionally care about somebody who I'd only just really met. But I knew it and I was certain of it. So in my 6th grade school, in my class, we had this pretty fucked up program that they would do during Valentine's Day, where you could order roses and they would deliver them to other students in the school without notice, without warning, in the middle of classrooms with notes. So that was the day that I was going to express my love for Sarah. So I remember pulling up to school. I was sitting in the back seat of my mom's 4-door Acura Legend, and my mom, my sister in the front seat, and this is on a Monday morning, and it's, 2 or 3 days worth of build-up in my family to this moment. I was getting advice from my parents and my sister and my aunts and uncles and cousins, and I just needed to know what to do, because this was the first time I was ever going to share with somebody how I felt about them. So I got out of the car and ran up into the building, up the stairs, down the hallway and into my English teacher's classroom, because she ran this program. So ran up to her desk, threw $5 on the table, and ordered 2 red roses. She gave me a card, and I had to write a note. So as eloquently as a 6th grader could write, I wrote all of my feelings on a piece of paper that basically were summed up as, Sarah, I really, 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 really like you. Love, Rehan. I crossed out the love and wrote from Rehan, and crossed out the from and put a heart, Rehan. But that was my expression. That was it. It was that simple. So handed the card, flowers went off, I went to class. Now we were all in separate classes at this point. We would switch out during the day. It was kind of like a pre-high school thing. And I was nervous, I was sweating the entire time because she wasn't actually in my class at that moment. She was in another classroom. So I didn't know when she was gonna get the roses or how she was gonna react or what was gonna happen, but I had this vision of what was gonna happen. I created it so perfectly in my head. Given what I can see in the room, only half of you are going to know this reference, but there was a show in the late 80s called The Wonder Years. And The Wonder Years was the kind of coming of age love story for kids, right? There was a girl named Winnie Cooper who was the iconic girl next door who was my Sarah, or Sarah was my Winnie. And then there was a guy named Kevin who was the kind of the hero of the story, right? And that was me. And there's this one episode when Kevin finally tells Winnie how he feels and she tells him how she feels, and they're sitting on a rock outside in the playground and they kiss for the very first time. And that was exactly how this was gonna be, to a T. Nothing could screw that up. So bell rings, I run out of my class, and I go down the hall to my next class, stop by my locker, start changing out my books. And this group of guys walk up behind me, busy hallway. And they're the group of guys in school that, like, if they walk up behind you, you're screwed. Led by this guy, Brian, who was he was like the jock, I guess, right? He was tall, funny, athletic. Girls loved him. He was good looking and had it all figured out at 11 years old. And I didn't. So he comes up behind me, taps me on the shoulder, and as like dramatically, and it's like a TV show. It's like a bad movie. He's like, hey, I was in class earlier. I'm like, great. And he goes, your flowers got delivered. And I froze. Because I never, in the entire scenario, I never factored other people being in the room, despite the fact that I knew other people were gonna be in the room. I just kind of blocked that out of my mind. But sure enough, the flowers got delivered into a class that he was sitting in. And I ignored the chuckling kids in the background. I ignored everything else was going on. I was just looking at Brian, and I asked him, like, what happened? How'd she react? And he said, well, she turned bright red and she was embarrassed and everyone laughed at her. And then my 24 roses showed up. And that's when Brian decided to tell me that she really liked him. And that's fine. That happens, right? But then he also decided to tell me that no girl like her would ever like me. And then he started to list all the reasons why. So in that day, I learned a handful of things about myself. I learned that I had 1/4-inch thick glasses, and that was an ugly thing. I learned that I had a face full of acne, and that was an ugly trait to have. I had a mouthful of braces, that was ugly. More importantly, I learned about something that was going on apparently my entire life. A door opened, a curtain was pulled back, and I was let in on a joke that apparently was being played on me the entire time. I was tall, I was skinny, I was nerdy, I didn't have a lot of friends, I was awkward, I didn't know how to talk to people, and that was all ugly. And for the first time, I was in the 6th grade, I had a group of kids very aggressively communicating to me all the reasons why I was different, I was awful, I wasn't gonna be liked, and I was ugly. Today, that's called bullying, right? At the time, there wasn't any help for it. At the time, it was just boys being boys, kids are mean, you can get over it. And in a way, you could. The most valuable part of my experience was the era that I grew up in. I grew up in a time when I would go to school in the morning, I'd get to class at, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd walk down this gauntlet hallway of kids making fun of me. And I'd spend an entire day from like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. getting beat up, getting pushed, getting shoved, getting made fun of, pranks getting pulled on me, everything that could happen during that time period. But at 3 o'clock, I'd walk outside, tears in my eyes, and my mom's car would pull up. And I'd get in the car and we'd drive home. And for an evening, I had a protective bubble around me. And I had people whose sole purpose in life was to convince me that everything that I was learning during the day was wrong. I was handsome, and I was smart, and I was funny, and girls were gonna like me, and I was gonna have friends, and all this stuff was gonna work out. So I'd fall asleep feeling loved, and I'd wake up in the morning with a new sense of confidence, and I'd get ready, and I'd go to school, and I'd get dropped off, and it would start all over again. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, it continued and continued and continued. Now I say the era that I grew up in was probably the best thing that could have happened to me because of that protective bubble. Fast forward today, and you have the same kid. You have a 6th grader who goes to school on Valentine's Day, and he's going to tell somebody that he has fallen in love with for the very first time how he feels. Right? A moment that's going to define how that person reacts in every similar situation for the next 30 years of their life. And the same thing is going to play out. He's going to send roses. Hopefully they still don't have that program, but he's going to send roses, and she's going to get them. And he's going to run into Brian in the hallway, and he's going to get made fun of, and he's going to get bullied, and he's going to get picked on. And then at the end of the day, he's going to get on the bus, or his parents are going to pick him up, and he's going to get home. He's going to log into his computer, and he's going to find out that the bullies have followed him home. All of a sudden, there's a 15-second YouTube video that's been posted of Sarah getting the flowers, and her getting made fun of, and everyone laughing, and her bursting into tears, and Brian making fun of the kid in the hallway. And views are racking up. And within 72 hours, there are 4 million people that have watched this. And now the bullies aren't just the people that you know. There are hundreds and hundreds of comments from people that this kid will never meet in their entire life, telling them that they're never going to be loved, they're never going to be liked, and they might as well do the world a favor and kill themselves. And I'm assuming that 50% of the people in the room are going to say that's an exaggeration. Last year at Life is Beautiful, we had a speaker, her name was Lizzie. And her story, now she's a professional speaker, she's an inspirational speaker. And she tries to talk about building people's confidence. She became this because she, similar to my situation, lived an entire life protected. That she was loved, people cared about her. She was beautiful and she was amazing, and that's all that mattered. And then one day she Googled herself, her name, and a video came up, and it was an 8-second video titled "The Ugliest Girl in the World." And it was just photos of her. Now her issue, she's got a disease, a lifelong illness that doesn't allow her to gain any weight. But her parents never treated her differently. Her friends never treated her differently. People around her never treated her differently. But all of a sudden somebody posted this. And literally 4.5 million views later, hundreds of comments, people telling her to put a gun into her mouth and shoot herself. And she repeats this. She says this all the time in her speeches. The important thing for us and the purpose of this whole kind of story is to really get a deep-seated understanding of what's happening in the world. Right? The world is a fundamentally different place than it was 15 years ago, than it was 20 years ago. I found out the other day that I'm part of this lost generation, that I grew up at a time when computers still existed and the internet existed, but before Facebook became open access to everyone. I was the last graduating class before Facebook became open to everybody. So I'm on the verge of understanding, but I don't even understand. Right? The level of access that we have to other people, to like-minded people, you would think allows us to have more experiences and to understand that there are more people in the world who are just like us. But the reality is, people are getting confined to these little boxes of fear that they have to live in. Because while access to great stories exist, people aren't telling those stories. People aren't sharing their examples of going through the same challenges, but the negativity is fueled and it's amplified. Now, all of a sudden, you've got people they could be 13 years old, they could be 30 years old, they could be 75 years old, and because of fear, for a number of issues, and it's not just related to bullying, right? There are hundreds of social issues that people are going to battle, and they feel like they're trapped and they feel like they're stuck. So what do we do? The reason why we start, you're not supposed to say or in a speech, by the way. The reason why, what's that?
Hello, Obama.
Now it became political.
It's okay.
The reason why I started Life is Beautiful was I wanted to encourage people to see that life was full of hope and opportunity and beauty through the lens of people who have experienced the same challenges that they're going through. Right? So if you've got a 11-year-old who's getting bullied, The idea that they can hear my story and see the result of it. And hear that it's not easy and it's painful and it's going to change you for the rest of your life, but it is not the end of your life. Every one of us has a story. Every one of us has an experience that somebody is literally dying to hear or is willing to die if they don't hear it. And I'm not just talking physical suicide, there's emotional suicide. There's just giving up on life because you do not believe you're good enough. And nothing has encouraged you to see that. So for Life is Beautiful, we decided to break the norm of how events give back. Typically, events give back in the form of giant checks that get handed in front of a camera at the end of a festival so we can say, look, we gave $100,000 to a nonprofit, we are good people and we care. But during the process of developing the festival, we still refer to our customers, as fans, as attendees. We refer to our business clients as clients. We don't refer to them as people. We don't refer to them as individuals. And that's largely the purpose here, is to encourage you guys in whatever endeavor you're taking, whether you're going back to school or you're starting a business or you're a singer or a songwriter or a dancer or want to be a doctor or a therapist or whatever it is, understand that the people that are around you on a day-to-day basis, just socially, casually, people that you haven't met, but more importantly, people that you really have a lot of contact with, need your help. And in any given day, it's our responsibility to find ways to uniquely and independently provide a source of happiness to somebody who needs it. And it could be as simple as telling the person in line behind you at a coffee shop that they're beautiful. They're gonna appreciate that a ton. And there's a 99% chance that you are not gonna share those words because you are too scared to do so. That is selfish. Buddy of mine that's sitting right there, the bearded gentleman, always says the more you give out, the more you put out, the more you're gonna receive. And I think it's cheesy, but it's true. It's true. You have an opportunity, and it starts with understanding the problem. It starts with understanding that every single person that you are around at any given moment is scared. They're scared because they just met somebody and they don't know if it's gonna work out. They're scared because they're sitting next to somebody that they've been in love with for 10 years and they haven't been able to share it. They're scared that they're gonna get fired. They're scared they're never gonna get hired. They're probably going through a divorce, or their kids don't like them, or their family's in shambles, or they're battling disease or illness or something, and they're not gonna tell you. There's an amazing art to looking at somebody's eyes and understanding what's going on behind them. So what I'd encourage you to do is find ways to do that, and find ways to do that at a very granular level. So going back to the Life is Beautiful example, we don't give a giant check and say, we're doing great. Right? We gave $100,000 to a suicide prevention organization and we're saving the world. We try to find little ways to thank people who aren't being thanked, to acknowledge people who aren't being acknowledged, to share stories with people who need those stories. So last year we launched a website that had a bunch of video content that you could search by social need, addiction, suicide, fear of loss, trying to come out, trying to find a career, whatever it may be, anything that's got you a little bit stuck. We were trying to find sources of examples where you could physically see somebody on a computer, but see somebody who's gone through that challenge. And maybe that'll just open your eyes for a moment and make you realize that there is another day, and that day can be brighter. Right? So we do it that way. In addition, there's small moments where we can help people. There was a guy who lives locally who was terrified last year because and you should have seen him, he came into our office and the guy was shaking. He was terrified because he met the person he wanted to spend his entire life with. And he had no idea how to tell her that he wanted to spend his entire life with her. He had no idea how to propose. And he had a brief idea, so he came to us and said, look, she loves the flaming lips. She said one day, well, I think their first date, she said she wanted to walk down the aisle to Do You Realize? And that was her thing. And he asked us for help. So we put them on stage during the Flaming Lips and had him propose in front of 20,000 people. There are teams of doctors, nurses, and staff that work in our local hospitals. We went into the children's hospitals for three different buildings and gave tickets to all the doctors, nurses, and staff and thanked them for the work that they do to keep our children healthy. We went to 3 Square, the food nonprofit, and went back into their kitchen where, I don't know, there were 40 volunteers packing lunches. And they're in this industrial kitchen, and then they're in the middle of nowhere, and no one's gonna see that they're doing this, but they do it. They show up every day and they do it. We gave them tickets. We go out every year at the beginning of the festival, and the first 30 people that are in line waiting to get in, we upgrade their tickets. Anything that we can do to provide little moments of happiness so an individual feels like somebody acknowledged their existence. And in the context of business, this may seem like a marketing ploy. It absolutely fucking is. It absolutely is. All marketing is trying to get somebody to do something that you want and they want to do for mutual benefit. Right? If you can convince somebody to buy a pair of Nikes because it's gonna make them healthier when they run in them, that's great for Nike and that's great for the person. But you have to acknowledge who the person is. You have to custom tailor the message to that person, because there is a way to sell your product. There is a way to accomplish your personal goal and still make the world a little bit better. And it involves a little more work. Right? Every company that I work with that sits down with me and goes, okay, we need a great ad that's gonna really sell our product. I'm like, great, who's your audience? They're like, well, we're thinking about putting a bikini model on the cover and like have her lay on a car. We're like, great, you don't sell cars, you don't sell bikinis, and you don't sell models. They're like, yeah, but people like sex. It's a good thing, it works. And these are the conversations that we're having over and over and over and over and over again. It's insane. Right? It's as simple as sit down with your customers, sit down with the people that are around you and just ask them questions, find out what's going on in their life and try to solve for those things in any way that you can. I mentioned earlier that life is about stories. Mine was incredibly deep-seated, mine was incredibly traumatic, but mine in the last few years has become a source of hope for people that I can share that with. Right? And that's my role. My role in the context of my day-to-day here in Vegas and any other places that we do events is to share with people the experience that I had. That's one of 100. But that's the experience that I choose to share the most often, especially when we're around anyone under the age of 22 years old. Find your story, hone it, right? Understand how to take something that is a deep-seated insecurity of yours and turn it into some sort of way to explain to other people that they don't have to be insecure, right? Because you're here, you're walking, you're alive, you're happy, you have a smile on your face, you have friends, you're at a cool event with lots of wood paneling. But like this stuff that you're doing, and I promise you, sorry man.
You okay back there?
I killed Adam. There's because the other person that you need to communicate this to isn't having that kind of day. They're probably still in bed. And it's probably really, really hard for them to get out of bed. 1 in 5 people that you're gonna run into in any given day are battling some form of depression. And it's solvable. But it's not gonna just work itself out. Be the source of somebody else's happiness. Right? I'll say that again a little bit differently. Individually, in every moment that you can, be the source of somebody else's happiness. Make that your objective. Even if it's in a quick interaction, you'd be surprised how much you start learning about the people that you're gonna need to accomplish whatever goals you have. And you're gonna all of a sudden realize what it's like to have that come back to you. That's all I got. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Rehan.